Okay, so Olipop, prebiotic soda, healthy soda, functional soda. Walmart's been calling it modern soda. Your new ad calls it the feel-good soda.
Yes.
What do you like to call it, and why does any of this matter?
What a great question. Well, so I always rankle a little bit against prebiotic soda. We do have prebiotics, but I do like healthy soda, functional soda, or modern soda. The way I like to think about it, so soda's been in the US, obviously, an enormous machine for like 150 years. And then in the 70s, you started to have the advent of diet soda, which was pretty novel. I know we'll talk about post-World War II commodification later.
Get excited.
Get excited, guys. You're going to get a history lesson. But basically, we started because of dietary changes, we started to want to remove sugar, and that was obviously the diet soda revolution. That kind of peaked in the 90s. And this category is effectively the modern incarnation of soda. So the way that I'm looking to build Olipop in the category is that it's effectively like the third leg of the stool. And I think the reason why this category is doing so well. So for example, our functional soda category hit $2 billion in retail scans 7 years into its existence, which was 2 years faster than energy hit that same number when it started in the United States. So we're growing faster, and Walmart and Target just created 12-foot sets, which is also like really ahead of the curve. So there's an enormous TAM. There's an enormous problem because it's a beloved legacy category with a really deep emotional relationship with the consumer, but there's a substantial problem state, and that's something that we solve. So this category really meets the need of the consumer, and I think it will just become the third option in soda for the long term.
Who is that consumer? Is it a kombucha drinker? Is it a Diet Coke drinker trading up? Is it a Coke drinker, someone who won't drink any kind of soda anymore? Like, who are you trying to target?
Well, okay, so we started with we started as a small, scrappy company in natural, talking to people on TikTok and Instagram, so it was the white millennial female. It was our bread and butter at the beginning. But then we had also a really quick spike into Gen Z. Now we've actually got an extraordinary amount of Gen Alpha. We also do well with older generations, Gen X and Boomers as well. And it's because soda is like the ultimate big tent category. The two main groups that we interface with now is basically, our experience from all of our category insights mapping is that most of the diet soda, we get a certain amount of diet soda or zero consumers, but most of those folks are kind of happy with the trade-off they've already made. It's like, I basically get my soda experience. What I wanted to get out was the sugar, and we get some of them, but they're mostly
So they're going to stick with Diet Coke and Diet Pepsi?
For the most part, that's what we've seen. It's not always true, but it is oftentimes true. There's stuff in there like the phosphoric acid and stuff that sometimes people wake up to and they're like, maybe I shouldn't drink this, but for the most part, they're happy. We more pull from, when we do our category tree mapping, we mostly pull from full sugar soda consumers.
Oh, that's so interesting. So Coke and Pepsi are bigger that you can pull from.
We pull way more out of. We pull way more from Red Can Coke than any other group, and then we bring in a lot of lapsed consumers. So basically, people who love soda eventually realize it was too much of a health issue, and also we really over-index with families, and that's what makes this whole Gen Alpha, Gen C thing fantastic because basically if mom or whoever's doing the shopping for the family wants something to give their kids that their kids aren't gonna think is cool and naturally resonate with. So I was just getting an IV transfusion yesterday to be all peppy for the show, and I was chatting to the phlebotomist and talking about Olipop, and she's like, "Yeah, I got my kids and my parents off of Pop with Olipop," and so it has that really nice, soda, and the gentleman from Pepsi was just on here, so we could talk about it probably better than I could, but soda really is such a familial, social thing, and so the ability to have a soda option that you know that you can feel good about, that you can bring your whole family in together with, and it doesn't feel like you're trying to get people to drink a vinegar bomb that costs $5, right? It's actually a very easy thing to integrate into the family life, and so I think that's all really contributed to the growth of the category, and then obviously the growth of Olipop. And we created the category. I've been really happy to see it blossom. The thing that I always worry about is like, what is the standards, the nutritional standards, and the scientific credibility of
Yeah,
some of the other players.
But phlebotomists aside,
I'm going to try to open this and see if it explodes. Okay, so let's see if I get a grape explosion on myself right now.
you're good.
Oh,
Good product.
did it.
So phlebotomists aside, when you think of like the archetypal Olipop consumer in your head,
Yeah.
who is that person that you're thinking of?
So I have my shorthand is always, this is just this random thing to me, and also my family's from Ohio, so that's probably where I do this. But like I always just imagine like a Walmart shopper in Ohio. That's kind of like the person I kind of think about. It's like it's a little more red leaning, but it's real like country heartland, and somebody who's and I get like stories that make. We went through this long phase in 2021 where I was really trying to figure out like who our consumer was, how to CSD consumers across different demos, think about Olipop and what are the decision matrices that they're making, and we've got a bunch of cool like data on a page. But the thing that was really powerful experience for me about that was it was the like testimony from some of the qual stuff that we did. And it was like actually like quite emotionally powerful stories. And so I was like, that's fascinating. So for about a year, I asked my head of customer service, when people are writing in, can you get me 2 or 3 customers a week and get an hour with them on my calendar? So for about a year, I talked to 2 or 3 customers a week, really consistently. I had like a bit of a script, like a handful of questions I always want to make sure to talk to them about. And the thing that was very transformative for me was the depth of the emotion that a lot of folks had around their relationship with soda. And this is something Coke, Pepsi, Dr. Pepper have known. It's a core part of their business model. I put a can of Coke on the table when you're a 5-year-old kid and it's your birthday party and everybody loves you and it's hyper-stimulating beverage, so your brain lights up like a Christmas tree, and now all of a sudden you're 35 and you're having a stressful day and you reach for a can of Coke and maybe you feel some conflict about it, but it still hits a certain spot that nothing else will hit. It's because that product was present for you during these like crucial identity formation moments. And so, being able to meet customers there and like meet them where their identities are instead of challenging them or shaming them has been a really important part of our platform.
So now you are trying to light up people's brains in that same way.
Yes.
You're turning on the marketing tap now. This is the first time in the company's history that you're putting real money behind a central brand message. How old is the company?
We incorporated in 2017, and we hit shelves in late 2018.
So what took so long?
I'm not doing the math on that.
What took so long to get into marketing?
So, oh God. How much time do you guys have? So, like, basically,
we have 9 minutes and 54 seconds, so
fair.
probably less.
So, the high level way to describe it. So, look, there's pull brands and push brands, and there's not anything intrinsically wrong with either model. Historically, Olipop has been more of a pull brand. So it's our name structure, our brand architecture was always good enough to like convey the central theme. At the beginning as well, the design mechanisms, the architecture was relatively novel. Most of our competitors effectively copied our name architecture and copied our brand architecture. So, 7 years in, like it's a little less breakout, hence the new brand world, which I think looks pretty dope. But, a lot of our history has been around pull brands, so it's the quality of the taste experience. It's the resonance that a lot of our customers have with the authenticity behind the mission. And it's the efficacy, right? We have way more science than was typical. I have always wanted to develop a strong marketing message, but I have never felt comfortable with anything that didn't feel like it translated our ethos accurately. And so I have just been an enormous pain in the ass, which is not atypical, but I've been a huge pain in the ass with the marketing team for a long time. I've gone through a couple of leaders until we finally landed on a wonderful marketing leader. Her name is Tara. She's incredible. And she's really taken the time to understand and do that translation work.
And have you seen that translate to business?
Well, it's really, really fresh. So the only business metric, because it's just coming out. We got a new sonic identity, which is the Lollipop, Lollipop song, but it's done Lollipop, Lollipop. It's very catchy. We've got new feel-good soda brand advertising coming out that is scoring really highly, but it hasn't really moved. But we also new brand world, there's new packaging, new visual landscape. So we have a 3-pack out of Costco, and it's the first big push with the new brand visuals, and it's the highest selling Costco pack we've ever had by like a substantial margin, including like our deepest sales that we've had at Costco before. So I think it's just getting started. But sometimes you just, as a founder, you kind of have this like, it resonates with you, and this shit resonates with me. I'm just like, this is gonna, how much Costco get? This is gonna crush. Like I'm just like, I feel it in my bones. I know this thing is gonna. So I think we're gonna do a lot of testing throughout the course of this year, testing and refining. We've got a little bit of fiber education and like nutrition education as well that we're gonna test throughout the course of this year. If I like the way this is all playing out, then we're gonna do some ramped up spending through this year, but then we're gonna really go hell for leather in 2027.
So you mentioned before you created the category. You now have competition from the biggest names in the category. We just heard from Pepsi, which bought Poppi for about $2 billion. So when are you selling?
When am I selling? Oh boy. I do not currently have plans to sell.
Why not though? Talk me through like a mission first versus selling.
So look, I think I am somebody who I don't care about money that much. I don't have an MBA, I dropped out of college. The only thing that I try to live a very meaning-based life. And so the only thing that I really care about doing with my life is helping human health and consciousness at scale. So then I try to find the vehicles that allow me to be the most effective at accomplishing that. And it felt like going directly at something as enormous but deleterious as soda would be a phenomenal way to make a lot of disruptive and positive change. I'm pulling sugar out of the American diet because we're a low sugar beverage, and then I'm putting functional, empirically backed ingredients into, and we have like a ticker on our website of here's how much sugar we've removed and here's how much fiber we've added. So I have raised investor capital, which means I do require a liquidity event, and that's okay. But I'm always going to balance, the team and it's not just solely my decision, but I'm always going to balance impact and economic outcome. I will not sell to a business where I do not feel an atypical amount of like certainty that whoever picks us up is going to not gut the quality of the product. They're going to treat the brand with respect. They're going to treat the consumer with respect. They need to understand, care for, and pay for all of our science. And I want Olipop to be around for 10, 50, 100 years from now and still delivering real value to a customer. If that ends up manifesting in an acquisition, and I feel, okay, there's like a pretty good chance that like I can let my baby go and that'll happen, cool. If not, we have a profitable, super robust P&L. We have a super strong balance sheet. We have really great double-digit growth. We're adding EBITDA every year. We just over-delivered this first quarter by 15% against forecast. Like, we're doing great. We have a lot of options, and so I'm leaving all options on the table. It's not like going public is free from peril either. So like every route has bullshit attached to it, but like you have to make the best. Try to make the most balanced. We're going to try to make the most balanced decision we can as we go through that process.
I'm going to skip the history lesson about how this product really comes out of World War II. Although he does a great 10 minutes about that.
Thanks,
you
man.
should all ask in the hallways after. We'll get to questions in 1 second. But you told me something last night. You said that you are excited to talk about pricing. Nobody is ever excited to talk about pricing.
Yeah.
Why are you excited about it?
Well, I think the thing that I don't want to do is I don't want to pretend like we're not a premium product. And I don't want to pretend like people aren't really cash strapped right now. And so I think like there's a lot of cynicism that is felt in the purchasing population. There's a lot of cynicism that's felt amongst the, kind of like journalism class because the majority of what's out there is bullshit. Like we have in the health and wellness sector, which I think personally I find like really upsetting. I mean, you have basically a $300 billion industry domestically between food, supplements, and beverage, and I think like 1% or so of brands do independent clinical testing to figure out if their product is actually conveying value to the consumer, right? So I won't spend too long on it, but like we have an ongoing relationship with Purdue and their lab. All of our formulas go through their clinical pipeline for testing. We've done human clinicals now on blood sugar stability, A1C levels. We're working with insurance companies. We've gotten SNAP waivers in a bunch of different states. Like we're really putting our money where our mouth is so that the dollars that we're charging are actually contributing real value. Plus, it turns out when you use anywhere from 3 to 8 times the amount of functional ingredients as your competitors, that does translate to a higher cost of goods. And so I'm really happy with our gross margin, but if you want to run a healthy business. So for me, it's always just been like, I don't want to pretend we don't have an expensive product for a lot of people. Obviously, if you get it at Costco or if you get it in a multi-pack, the price is down a bit. But it's really about trying to make sure I've got trust and credibility so that at least when somebody who is making difficult decisions around their grocery purchasing, it opts for a higher priced product, they at least can know that that we are fulfilling on our side of the promise, and we're really there to actually make their lives better and their families healthier. So yeah, that's just, and we have all sorts of RGM that we could jack the shit out of our price, and I'm not planning on doing that unless we really are clear that whatever premiumization that we're offering actually confers the benefit that's worth the price increase.
So we could talk about AI and MAHA and FSAs and HSAs and SNAPs, but I want to do a Q&A very quickly. We have time for 1 or 2 questions. Yeah, 1 question here.
Well, thank you for the passionate discussion, Ben Squared. That was good. I'm Caitlin Allen from Symbii. So Ben, you have D2C channels. You also have DSD channels, and you've described a lot of the passion and the genius that goes into the marketing behind this brand. But at the end of the day, if you don't have visibility into what's on the shelf and that the price is accurate, you can't sell to the passionate consumer that wants your product. And so I'm curious what your thoughts are about getting retailers and brands on the same side of the table to have the same level of visibility into what's actually on the shelf and whether there's price accuracy.
Yeah, it's probably more of a question for my head of commercial, but I will do my best. So we're actually mostly warehouse. We're mostly direct. We're less than 10% DSD, which I've been so we just do DSD in selective metros where we want kind of deeper penetration. But we actually get a lot of really great compliance from our accounts being mostly warehouse. And then, I use a range of third-party merchandisers, and we have a really robust field sales team, and we have been increasingly getting higher and higher corporate-level relationships inside of a lot of our largest retailers. So is everything always going to be perfect with pricing? Of course not, but I have no data that I have any kind of big widespread issues with pricing with pricing differentials.
Last question. What's your favorite flavor?
Oh, jeez. It really rotates. Well, actually, something I'm really excited about, we're out of time, but we just did a raspberry sherbet.
Raspberry sherbet.
Raspberry sherbet, and it had been in my head for 2 years, and everybody's like, I don't know, and then I was like, we're just doing it.
Executive decision for raspberry sherbet?
Well, I formulate all the products, in my little lab, so sometimes we do stuff that, I know people are gonna want because it meets a classical soda need, and then sometimes it just gets this harebrained idea. But I like that it's a mixture of known knowns and curveballs, and it makes me really happy.